Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Way Outta Here, the Philly sports podcast with fan perspective from way outside the greater Philadelphia area. My name is Steve Prudente, here with you as always to take you on the journey for the next half hour or so. Welcome to winter. Yes, I'll say it. We've got a little bit less than a week left, technically in fall, until that meteorological solstice happens, but it feels like we are in the thick of it. It is cold outside, we got some snow on the ground, and the seasons of the sporting calendar seem to indicate that we're in the thick of it as well, with the Flyers, Sixers, and of course the Eagles celebrating some wins recently. I will get into all of that in a bit, but before I do, I'd like to remind you to subscribe to me on the social media platform of your choice, on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube now at Way Outta Here Podcast, on Blue Sky, Way Outta Here Pod, on the blog, wayoutaherepodcast.blogspot.com, and if you've got any feedback for me, you can always send an email to wayoutaherepodcast@gmail.com. I'm available just about wherever you get your podcasts, on Apple and Spotify. If you leave me a rating, that would be great, but it'd be even greater on Apple if you'd write me a review. Thank you so much in advance. I will begin, as I always do, by introducing the beer of the show. Today's selection is from New Trail Brewing in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. I've chosen the Conifer Cosmos Hazy IPA. We'll have more on that at the end of the show. So as you could probably guess from looking at the title of the episode, I chose today's topic to be winning in winter, because, as I said, it feels like we're there. And the Eagles, Sixers, and Flyers have recently had some successes to celebrate on the court, on the ice, on the field. We've also got some Phillies and Union chatter, and I actually wanted to start off with the Phillies because everybody wants to talk about the Eagles. That's the big news. You know, we always have a little bit of an Eagle-centric bias in the Philly sports universe. But from my perspective, the biggest news of the last week or so was Kyle Schwarber re-signing with the Philadelphia Phillies at the Major League Baseball winter meetings last week. It was a little bit bigger for me as well because there was some chatter here in the greater Pittsburgh area, which you might have heard about from afar, depending on where you are, or if you happen to be here in Pittsburgh. You might have heard it a little bit more up close and personal like I did. But back to the beginning of it, Kyle Schwarber did re-sign with the Philadelphia Phillies. Also, manager Rob Thompson did as well. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute here. But Kyle signs for 5 years, $150 million. It makes perfect sense. It's kind of right about where all of the baseball pundits thought he would end up. Decent enough market value for a player of his age, of his caliber, what he's shown us on the field in the last 4 years. If you can believe it's been 4 years already that Kyle Schwarber's become a Philly, but wow, what a great 4 years it's been. And he deserved the contract. That felt like he probably could have been given a little bit more, to be honest with you. I know some people out there thought that this deal that he just signed was a tiny bit of an overpay. I disagree with that. The guy's given us so many great moments in a Phillies uniform, and on top of that, those great moments were very productive for the team on the field. I would have to look into the actual stats to know how many wins he's contributed to. There are advanced metrics that say that, but the eye test for me, you had to bring this guy back, whatever the cost was going to be, both from an on-field perspective and also what he brings you in the clubhouse. That locker room just would never be the same without this guy. So I was thrilled when this news came down. Very timely as well because it came the day after the Eagles had a gut-wrenching defeat, which we will, again, get into in a little bit later part of this episode. But came the day after that, so lifted our spirits just a little bit. We had heard a whole bunch of rumors and chatter in the weeks leading up to this. You've already heard me talk about my disdain for the baseball offseason. I'm glad that these winter meetings didn't go by without something happening, especially for our team, but a lot of other things happened as well. And it was great to hear that because I just get so tired of hearing rumors upon rumors and chatter and speculations. I just get bored with it. So when something like this monumental happens in the first couple of days of the meetings, yeah, I was thrilled. And we had heard some of that chatter leading up to it was that there were a few specific teams that had been mentioned with interest in him, and most notably were the Cincinnati Reds, a smaller market team, but interest because Kyle Schwarber grew up near there, and he was openly courted by them when the Phillies visited Cincinnati in the 2025 season. That kind of made sense for them to go after a star like that just because of his hometown ties. The New York Mets, of course, with their deep pockets and what we think is a win now window for them, wanting to throw some more money at a superstar who's going to give you a whole lot of production in and out of the lineup. There was also, we found out later after the fact, the Baltimore Orioles and the Pittsburgh Pirates, which I will get into more specifically after a little bit more information here. It was revealed after the fact that the Baltimore Orioles had offered the same exact value that the Philadelphia Phillies did. So Kyle Schwarber had basically told the Phillies, hey, whatever somebody else makes, I will give you the right to match it. And the Phillies were given the option to match that 5-year, $150 million deal. And from his perspective, I think it totally makes sense to re-sign with Philadelphia given the equal contract value, because players are human beings. He's got a family to think about. Nobody likes to move their stuff, and professional athletes are no different than any of that. The Cincinnati Reds apparently had offered a very similar offer. I don't have the exact figures in front of me, but when you consider what I just mentioned about not wanting to leave and not wanting to uproot your family, and also if you look at the organization as a whole, what their strategy was, it didn't really make sense for Kyle Schwarber to go there for the same money. He would have to maybe break the bank a little bit more to get him over the finish line, even though he had ties to the area from his youth. The Mets apparently offered a 3-year, $120 million deal, which less years, more money, but again, there's that factor of having to leave where you're comfortable right now, going to a different market, different team, a little bit of a different kind of pressure cooker in New York, and I got the feeling that this was one of those offers they were just going to up the numbers to say that they were in the conversation, but I don't think Kyle Schwarber was ever going to take it seriously. The Reds, it was revealed after the fact as well, I think that they were the only serious contender in my opinion, maybe Baltimore you could say as well, but it was revealed that the Reds, their strategy this offseason was to go after Kyle Schwarber and put everything that they could resource-wise into that and didn't really have a backup plan. Their public relations department somehow leaked that they didn't have a plan for the rest of the roster other than that Kyle Schwarber would increase ticket sales. I don't know how you let that leak, but that is a colossal failure from a public relations standpoint and also organizational management as well. I have some friends in Ohio from living out there who are Reds fans, and they were absolutely disgusted and dejected, and they should be, at what came out about the organization after this was revealed and their strategy this offseason. You know, they do have a lot of young talent on that team with Ellie De La Cruz and all the things that he's been doing. The Reds did make the playoffs last year. They got swept out by the Dodgers, but they do have an exciting young nucleus of talent that could be productive if they made the right moves, but it's pretty clear that they're not really interested in that. So Kyle Schwarber decided to shy away from whatever they offered. The Baltimore Orioles, as we already mentioned, I don't think that was a really serious offer that Kyle Schwarber was going to consider, but it does indicate that they're ready to turn the page from what was, I'll put it nicely, a lackluster season last year. And then there are the Pittsburgh Pirates, who I heard a ton about out here. I also don't think that this offer was serious, but I don't think it was serious from a management standpoint. I think they put this out there again to say that they were part of the conversation. They offered him 4 years, $100 million. Kyle Schwarber was not going to uproot his life to come to Pittsburgh, even though I love the city. A lot of people do as well. He was not going to come to a small market like Pittsburgh. If he was going to do that, he would have gone to Cincinnati. So I think that this was just a totally unserious move by the Pirates organization, Bob Nutting, and whatever the heck they're doing up there. It was interesting to hear people in Pittsburgh, though, talk about this and having some optimism. I felt bad for them because I knew in my heart and in my head that it was never going to happen. There's something to be said about an organization that has done so ill by its fans over this many years. What's it been like, let's say 30 years or so? That when something like this comes up, the fans have no choice but to be excited because they are so used to absolute dog shit through and through from an organization. We might have mentioned on this podcast before, but just in case, I will mention again what had happened last year when Pirates management had taken out their Memorial Brick Walk of Fame, the walk where people could spend money to donate donate money to a charitable organization, and in exchange for that, you got to engrave your name or your family's name, memorial, or just, passing good vibes on a brick that you would see in perpetuity, we thought, outside the stadium. People would come and take photos with that. Hey, this is Grandpa Joe's brick. This is where me and my buddies met for our first beers after so-and-so got married. All nature of reasons why you would get a commemorative brick. And they took these bricks, removed them, didn't tell anybody, and they were found in what equated to a garbage pile somewhere in the greater Pittsburgh area. Imagine if that happened in Philadelphia. And that is just one of many examples that this Pittsburgh organization has failed its fans and failed them horribly. All this to say that I felt terrible when people here got excited about this, because I knew, and I really do think that deep down they also knew, it was never going to happen. And, I felt bad for them. That also reminds me that, as I've said many, many times on this podcast and will continue to say through and through, be glad that we cheer for the Phillies. Even when they disappoint us, even though we've had so many heart-wrenching defeats, especially over the last few years, it is better to be rooting for an organization who at least gives a shit, that wants to put a good product on the field and also wants to do right by its fans off the field. So be thankful we've got Kyle Schwarber back for at least another 5 years. I don't know, of course, what that contract's going to look like at the end, but really, you kind of had to pay this money and keep this guy on the team. And now, because of that, the offseason can really start to take shape, and thank the maker. Baseball offseason is far too long, in my opinion. The doldrums especially start to wear on you in January and February, when you're right on the cusp of pitchers and catchers reporting. That's when it does start to get exciting again. But that right now, in the middle of December, feels like ages away from now. So this offseason can really start to take shape. I just wanted to take a little bit of an aside here. The Mets have been dominating the headlines for all of the wrong reasons of late. They traded away Brandon Nimmo, who, as annoying as he is, was kind of one of the heart and soul guys of that clubhouse, an admittedly fractured clubhouse, as we saw parts of last season. They let Pete Alonso go in free agency to the aforementioned Baltimore Orioles. Hey, good for him. As much as I have mocked Pete Alonso, he's a good player. He's still a very solid hitter in this league, and he's a piece that Mets lineup is for sure going to miss. Also, Edwin Diaz, their closer, left via free agency as well. I don't know what is going on in that organization. It seems kind of to me like guys are just not happy with the vibe there. We heard all kinds of stories. Don't know how many of them are true, about fractures in the locker room, Juan Soto getting into fights with Francisco Lindor, and so on and so forth. I'm absolutely here for it as a Phillies fan, because that just gives me more reason to believe that this team can continue to be successful in the division, make the playoffs again, and be contenders, which is really what you need. If you're going to succeed and get wins, win World Series, the first step is getting to the playoffs, and you can't do that if your organization is in shambles, like it seems like the Mets are. But let's not put the cart before the horse. There's still a lot of work left to be done, especially from the Phillies side of things. JT Realmuto, catcher, is seemingly the most common name that's coming up next, at least in my mind and a lot of other circles. We don't really have another plan for the catching position, so I'd like to see the Phillies get him done for at least another couple of years. He's getting older, but he's still very good, both behind the plate and productive enough at the plate that he's not a liability. They also need to make some decisions on the outfield. They did just recently sign, I think it was yesterday or the day before, Adolis Garcia from the Texas Rangers to help bolster that outfield. I do think they're still going to have to find a way to move on from Nick Castellanos, and I would really love to see them re-sign Harrison Bader. I don't know if that's going to happen, but he was a productive guy that came in at the trade deadline last year. I loved the energy and the presence that he brought. He seemed to fit in very well, not only just with the team, but the city as well. I would love to see that happen. And to round this all out, over the winter meetings last week, Rob Thompson was extended for another year through 2027. There has been mixed reaction, as you can imagine, but I will not complain about him as a manager. He's been an awesome manager. So, I mean, short of winning a World Series, he's done just about everything you can ask of a manager. The playoff losses that the Phillies have had since he came on board were not all his fault. He's had his games. There were a couple games here and there that I can think of. Game 1 this year against the Dodgers, I would probably put on him. Could probably think of a couple others if I looked further into it, but you win as a team and you lose as a team. He's, as I said, certainly contributed to his fair share of losses, but his overall body of work, more good than bad. And he does have the best winning percentage Phillies manager in all Phillies history. And the other big reason why I don't think you can walk away from him is that he hasn't had that signature downfall moment, kind of like Grady Little did with the Boston Red Sox. I just watched that documentary on Netflix, The Comeback. You don't have to be a Red Sox fan if you're just a baseball fan. You'd probably get some appreciation out of it. It was a pretty solid documentary. Rob Thompson has not had that kind of a moment yet. And until he does, I think he's going to be here. I like that they keep giving him another year so he doesn't come into the season as a lame duck manager. And it's a good sign of respect for a guy who, by all means on my end, I think he deserves it. I wanted to also mention this as a side note because I just mentioned a documentary. Another great baseball documentary that I saw recently came out was about the Montreal Expos. I can't remember the exact name of it, but if you search Montreal Expos documentary, I think it was like Who Killed the Montreal Expos. That was a pretty good piece of baseball history as well, and talked about the 1994 strike, which was certainly a catalyst to that, but the downfall of what was a much better franchise than I remember. We thought of them often as a laughingstock, but there were some really great players that came through there, and the Expos eventually moving to Washington to become the Nationals. Really great little couple of documentaries you might want to check out there during this long baseball offseason, which still has several months to go. But so far, I think we are off to a good start, and I'm looking forward to what's to come the rest of this winter. I'll keep a side eye to it, I suppose. I may not have my nose to the grindstone so much on the Phillies for the next couple of months, but I will be eagerly awaiting to see how this team fills out before we eventually get to spring training. All right, we'll move over to the football field. I mentioned earlier that the Phillies announced the Kyle Schwarber news the day after a devastating Eagles loss that was to the Los Angeles Chargers the Monday Night Football. I stayed up late to watch it. I was extremely disappointed, as I'm sure a lot of you were. I had gone into lengthy detail about how I felt that it would be a good move to move on from offensive coordinator Kevin Patullo or make some sort of a change because you could not keep doing what you were doing and expect things to get better. It looks like the Eagles allowed Nick Sirianni wedged himself in and was a little bit more involved in the offensive approach when they faced San Diego. San Diego, Los Angeles. Woo! Throwback there. The Los Angeles Chargers, and the offense did look better, I will say. The unfortunate thing was that Jalen Hurts, on the 5th anniversary of him taking over as a starter in the NFL, he had his worst game of his career, in my personal opinion. He almost actually had a chance to rebound in the same game. He's always been known to be resilient. He doesn't turn the ball over like that. It just doesn't happen. But for whatever reason, he was off that night. The offense did look better. There was a little bit more creativity with the play calling. There was some motion. But what unfortunately happened was in the second half, they once again refused to run the ball. And you saw that the result of that with Jalen Hurts being off and trying to force feed the throws, he threw 4 interceptions and had another turnover, a lost fumble, which a bang ridiculous play that you'll probably never see again. Apparently it hasn't happened in over 40 years in the NFL, where he threw an interception. The interception was fumbled, and then Hurts recovered the fumble and then fumbled himself, and that was also recovered by the Chargers. Just unbelievable the ways this team has found to lose sometimes this season. That said, they finished off that game, lost in overtime. really did have a chance to win to the end, despite how poorly Jalen Hurts played, and then rebounded very nicely against the Oakland Raiders. Oh my God, I called them Oakland. Las Vegas Raiders. Wow. What year am I stuck in, guys? I'm so sorry. Against the Las Vegas Raiders. And this is a Raiders team that if you cannot beat them convincingly this year, your team might actually be in trouble. There was a minor bit of thought of that in the back of my mind. Oh God, what happens if this Eagles team comes out and they just look like absolute crap, or they turn in one of those stinker performances like they did a couple of years ago against the Jets? And you're like, oh, this should be a get-right game, and it just isn't. Well, this one was absolutely a get-right game. The Eagles blow them out 31-0, and it honestly could have been even more if they hadn't faltered on one drive down in the red zone that resulted in a Jake Elliott field goal. But still, I'm going to have absolutely zero complaints about what happened Sunday afternoon down at the link. Was maybe going to be a snowball game, but looked like the winter storm had moved out before kickoff, and it looked very much like just a nice football weather game, albeit very cold. So that being said, the offense certainly showed up to play yesterday, and that's good to see, because this year I don't think any of the Eagles' losses could be pinned on anything but their offense. The defense has really only had what I would consider one bad game this season. That was against Chicago. And even so, they did keep the Eagles relatively in it despite giving up over 200 yards of rushing. The Eagles still had a chance to win that if their offense could have just gotten things together. The biggest thing I keep coming back to, because you saw it yesterday, what happens when you run the effing ball. Balanced attack. That's what we saw yesterday. Even if Saquon Barkley's not ripping off 20, 10, even 5 yards a carry, you got to stick with it. And towards the end of the game there, when it was garbage time, they did not give the Raiders any kind of a chance to get back into it. I think there was like 9 or 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and they kept handing the ball off to Tank Bigsby and all the backups. Tanner McKee got in the game and played some quarterback. Great to get those guys, the second stringers, in there. Not only do you preserve your health of your primetime players, your first string, but you get some of those younger guys and the guys that might not always get the chance to play some reps just in case they do have to come into game action. So Tank Bigsby, I did feel a little bad for him. He didn't get the touchdown in the end of that drive, but the offense did put together a nice, long, time-consuming drive to close out that game. It was never really in doubt. And to the point that I mentioned earlier about me wanting to pin all of the losses on the offense this year, and maybe one on the defense, but I would still say the offense. The Eagles, all of their losses have come when they scored 21 points or less. However, they have also won 3 games when they scored less than 21 points. Defense wins. The loss that the Eagles had to the Dallas Cowboys is the only time that they lost this season when they scored 20 points or more. Again, defense does win you games. It often wins championships as well. Flipping over to the other side of this equation, what else happened in the NFL yesterday was a very, very interesting afternoon. A bunch of cool things happened. So the Eagles got some help on the standings with losses by the Buccaneers. That actually happened on Thursday. But the Lions, the Packers, the Panthers, and the Cowboys all lost yesterday. So the Eagles are in position in the number 3 seed. And that is a good place to be because that gives you a home playoff game. You're probably going to have to play one of those tough teams from the NFC West, who very good division this year, and looking in good shape. Basically, the Eagles now only need to win one of their final 3 games, or the Cowboys need to lose any one of their final 3 games. The Eagles will wrap up the division. It's highly unlikely that they lose out, and it's highly unlikely that the Cowboys win out, even though the Cowboys have an easier schedule. Probability's good. Just got to show up on Sunday and do it. Actually, it's Saturday this week. The Eagles play the Commanders on Saturday afternoon. We're in that weird time of the NFL schedule where that's going to start happening. But Eagles got some help yesterday on a very interesting Sunday. I also wanted to mention this because you flip it around to a team with a horrible defense. We watched last night, Sunday Night Football. The Dallas Cowboys got absolutely dismantled by J.J. McCarthy and the Minnesota Vikings, who are out of a playoff spot. They're eliminated officially. And the Eagles handled them pretty well earlier in the season, albeit Carson Wentz was starting the quarterback, but they still took care of business. The Cowboys have lost or tied 5 games when they scored at least 3 touchdowns. So imagine that your team goes out and you score 21 points and you still lose or tie in 5 of those games. That is what happens when you have a bad defense. The Eagles, this is why it is not like 2023. We were having people talking about another collapse like we saw 2 years ago. That was a total team failure. Offense and defense were looking awful. The defense has looked solid through most of this season. They've had some stretches, like any team will here and there, where they didn't look great, but they've played well enough to keep this team in most, if not all, of their games. And that is what really has made the difference this year and should make the difference going forward as we head towards the playoffs. It looks like the Eagles are going to have a chance to repeat as division winners for the first time since the Andy Reid era, and that would be the last time that anybody in the NFC East has repeated as a division winner. I guess we'd have to go back to, 2004? 2004 season was the last time, and of course, the Eagles had won 5 straight division titles at that point. So looking forward to that, and we'll see what happens on Saturday. I have a feeling that the Eagles are going to come out, and they will be playing against Marcus Mariota. Here's another interesting little tidbit. This will be the second game in a row where Jalen Hurts is facing one of his former backups that played underneath him. He will be facing a former backup of his for the 3rd time this season in Carson Wentz. It counts. I know Wentz was the starter of that season, but he did supersede his position to Jalen Hurts later in that year. And Jalen Hurts could have played against 4 former backups if Gardner Minshew had been forced into action when the Eagles faced the Chiefs earlier this season. By the way, Chiefs got eliminated yesterday as well, so pretty crazy Sunday in the NFL. Looking forward to what's to come, and another Eagles playoff run, hopefully, on the horizon as soon as next week. Go Birds! On the basketball court, I wanted to pass this on for some of you who might be Sixers fans out there and also not living in the greater Philadelphia area, something that's going to help my viewing habits that I just discovered and probably should have known sooner. I was flipping around channels and realized that during the Sixers game versus the Golden State Warriors, I was following on my phone, it was on NBA TV, which is a listed channel on my YouTube TV subscription. I'm not sure which tier you have to be on to have that, but I was able to flip over to that game and catch the end of it. Kind of fortuitous because I got to see the best of both worlds. The Sixers did one of their signature moves of blowing a big lead, and then they were rescued at the end. A spectacular play by VJ Edgecombe to tip in a ball in the closing moments of that 4th quarter and seal the win. There was a block at the other end by Tyrese Maxey on a last-ditch effort shot by Golden State, but it was a thrilling victory to watch nonetheless. At the time, I had the Sixers on my phone just watching the live updates on the Sixers app while I was, oddly enough, watching the Dallas Cowboys lose to the Detroit Lions and come back to earth that night. I guess I didn't realize this because I don't really watch a ton of NBA other than the Sixers. I have made it no secret that basketball is my least favorite sport of the 4 major sports in the United States. I don't really seek it out other than watching the Sixers. So to that end, that's probably why I didn't notice this sooner, but nonetheless, I am very grateful that I found it now because I was relying on either watching them on ESPN or whatever other network they were on, and NBA TV now makes that, it probably doubles my ability to watch Sixers games when they're, not in the playoffs. So yeah, that was really neat. I was actually at home at my mom's house last weekend and got a chance to watch the Sixers, maybe Joel Embiid, play his best game of the season with 39 points versus the lackluster Indiana Pacers. They're kind of down in the dumps this season. And, it is what it is, but it's great to see that version of Joel Embiid back on the court. Will we see it with any regularity? That remains to be seen, but encouraging nonetheless. Of course, they followed that up with a tough loss versus the Atlanta Hawks on Sunday night. I guess can't expect that kind of success 2 nights in a row from Joel Embiid and company. But despite that, the Sixers looking very competitive this season. At the very least, they should be in the mix. I will continue to beat the drum that it's just way better than last season. And as much as this sounds kind of like a defeatist attitude, I will absolutely take it because last year was just a demoralizing year, and I, at this point, had already checked out on the season. I don't think I watched the Sixers game after December 1st last season. I would check in, read the box scores, and that was pretty much it. I don't know what the future holds, obviously, but they're 14-11 and still holding the 7th playoff spot. Would love to see them jump back up into the top 5 or 6 to avoid the play-in, but there's a lot of basketball left to be played, and it's just encouraging to see that they are where they are and getting some good contributions from a whole bunch of different guys, including the old guys coming back. The Philadelphia Flyers had an up and down last couple of weeks. They sit at 16, 9, and 6. They are 8th in points percentage in the league and 7th seed in the East as well. So the Sixers and the Flyers holding down 7th seeds in their conferences respectively. They had like I mentioned last time I spoke with you guys, a bit of a stinker of a game versus the Penguins, but they rebounded nicely versus the Sabres and have looked decent on the most recent homestand, despite that Tyson Forster injury, which was revealed to be kind of severe, happened during the Penguins game. He'll be out for 2 to 3 months, but some guys have been stepping in and contributing. They had plenty of chances versus the Colorado Avalanche and the Vegas Golden Knights to get wins, losing to both of those teams by just 1 goal. They did secure an overtime loss versus the Vegas Golden Knights and 2 in a row versus the Carolina Hurricanes, home and away. Lots of chances, like I just mentioned, for them to get over the hump and make a couple of those wins. But this team being competitive is really what we wanted to continue to see this year, getting better and better and getting some contributions from the younger guys and rounding out this team. They will have a tough task ahead of them as they are on the road for all but one of the final 9 games that they have in 2025. Part of that is going to be the Disney on Ice trip. Maybe I've mentioned this before in this podcast, but I haven't. I'll say it again. I really don't like the Disney on Ice trip, and it's not because of anything related to Disney. Grew up watching Disney. I was a Disney fan and still am to some degree this day, but they always have the Disney on Ice show at the it was the Wells Fargo Center. Now it's the Xfinity Mobile Arena. They've always had it in Philadelphia over Christmas. And because of that, I have never gotten to see a Flyers game live on my birthday, unless I would travel, and they're usually far out west. So maybe one of these years I will make a trip out west when the Flyers are on the road on my birthday and finally get to take in a game. But that is my extremely petty reason why I loathe the Disney on Ice trip. Players seem to have liked it over the years. They say it's a bonding experience. And you know what? That's fine. As long as it results in a better Flyers team that comes out strong and potentially wins in the end, I'm fine with that. I just, it's been a weird annoyance specific to me over the course of my life. And that's all. I did want to mention this. This is a bit of a tangential thing, but it's hockey related. Perhaps you've heard a little bit about the Olympic ice controversy with the arena not being complete. It's still not done from what I know, and it might not be done until February 2nd, which is the opening, and that's 3 days before games are supposed to start, at least for the women, as far as they're concerned. But basically, this surrounds that the ice is not going to be the dimensions that was agreed upon by the IIHF, the Olympic Committee, and the NHL, sending players over to play in these games. It looks like it's going to be slightly wider, inches we're talking, and then slightly shorter lengthwise than what they agreed upon. The ice needs to be deemed safe by the Players Committee and by the NHL and whoever else is involved there before they can agree to play on it. I don't know what's going to happen if they decide that it's unsafe and that they can't play on those conditions. My biggest question, though, is how does this happen? They were awarded the games in Italy 7 years ago. You've had 7 years to get this arena either constructed or in place, or if not, have a backup plan in place for this kind of a scenario. It's the biggest sporting event in the world, the Olympics, that is. I don't understand how this happens. Who needs to be held account? What they will do if it's not going to happen this way remains to be seen. I guess we'll just have to keep our eyes peeled and keep our ears tuned to what's going on and see what happens, because I was really excited, like I'm sure a lot of you hockey fans were out there, to see NHL players in the Olympics again. Some of my fondest memories watching hockey growing up were watching some of my favorite NHL stars playing for their countries. Because it's a different environment, it's a different kind of game, and hockey's just so much fun, and I really want to see these guys in the Olympics again. But that remains to be seen. I guess we'll have to wait and see. finally finish up with some soccer news. The Union acquired up to, they're actually in like kind of a fire sale mode, it seems like, over the last week or so. They may have acquired up to $500,000 for their homegrown player, David Vasquez, in a trade to San Diego. He made his first MLS appearance this season. I don't remember much about the guy, but I saw that come across. And then a few days later, we saw some rumors. I don't know if this is official yet, but striker Ty Baribo, reportedly going to the DC United, Eastern Conference rival. Don't love to see that. And then the saddest one, and this was actually confirmed just about 25-30 minutes before I started recording here, that Jakub Glesnes, defender, is going to the LA Galaxy, guy who came over in 2020 and has been an author and contributor to so many productive moments in recent Philadelphia Union history, including 2 supporter shields. He's been shipped out to the LA Galaxy, so this Union team we already are seeing is going to look vastly different next season than it did this year. See if all of these sales result in the Union actually spending some money for some more established talent. I'm not going to hold my breath, guys, but we'll see. I did also want to mention that Lionel Messi, since I last checked in with you guys, Lionel Messi and Miami won the MLS Cup. It kind of seemed like it was inevitable after they acquired him a few years ago that it was going to happen. So it did, and now we got that off our chest. We can move on. That's all I got to say about that. Finally, I wanted to mention that we did get the World Cup draw, and we know the opponents that the U.S. will play. And I was a little disappointed because maybe I should have seen this sooner, but it looks like the schedule where the U.S. is going to play will be games that are all out west. So if you're an East Coast U.S. soccer fan, and again, I'm not the hugest USMNT fan. I cheer more for the Union and, of course, Liverpool FC, but wanting to support my country and the sport of soccer in this country, it would have been cool if there was an opportunity even in Boston or New York or Philadelphia, of course, cities that are going to be hosting games for the World Cup, if they would have given us at least one date on the East Coast. Instead, it looks like they're all going to be on the West Coast. So if you're an East Coast fan, you're going to have a hard time seeing your team in the World Cup. Just wanted to mention that. A little disappointed with the draw and the schedule, but nonetheless, I will still be excited to see the USMNT and the World Cup here in the States. Still not sure if I'll be able to try to make it to a game in Philly, but that would be a fun trip. There's also the Major League Baseball All-Star game coming in July to Philly as well, so could make it a nice long vacation if you want to make it a sports trip. So that's going to wrap up what I have for you on this episode, celebrating more good than bad on this episode, some wins in winter, if you will, to round it all out. I will finish up with the beer of the show, as I always do, that I mentioned at the top of the show. I chose for this episode Conifer Cosmos Hazy IPA by New Trail Brewing Company in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. The Conifer Cosmos Hazy IPA is a collaboration with our friends over at Other Half Brewing. Pilsner, oats, and spelt create a light and fluffy backdrop for us to splash some star hops across, led by a new variety called Anchovy. And backed up with Chinook and Citra, Conifer Cosmos is swirled with watermelon candy, tangerine, and pine sap characteristics. Explode into space with Conifer Cosmos. Oh, quite a dynamic write-up there. I chuckled a little bit because I remember when I was reading the description of this before I bought it that it had anchovy hops. Of course, it said new variety of hops called anchovy. They do not taste like fish, just FYI. So you can rest assured there, if you do go try this beer, you're not going to be drinking something that tastes like fish. Perhaps if you want that, look for an oyster stout. But I digress. It did have a couple of hop varieties in there that I really do like in Chinook and Citra hops. Balanced out nicely. They did mention watermelon candy, tangerine, and pine sap characteristics. I didn't get so much of the candy. I did get a little bit of that tangerine citrus bitter flavor. The pine sap, that piney note, really came through in the aroma. It was really good. A nice drinkable beer. And I also wanted to mention, I found this previously at a local deli that also serves beer around here, the Carson Street Deli, but you can find it around you at a bunch of places. I've been seeing a whole bunch of people checking into it recently at places throughout Pennsylvania. New Trail does ship around the state. I also, this past weekend, this is why I chose this beer, is I was able to finally get up to New Trail Brewing Company in Williamsport on my way to visit my family back east. Happy 80th birthday, Aunt Sharon. I was able to stop in there. A great place to go and have a beer. Not quite as nice in the wintertime because you're a little bit closed into the space there, but they do have a great outdoor space, an indoor, quote unquote, indoor beer garden. It's closed in. Nice little space for you to go and enjoy a bunch of beers. Get yourself a flight, get some beer to go. Good variety on tap and in cans there. But I was able to finally get there. It was a place I'd been meaning to cross off for quite a few years. It's a little out of the way, off Interstate 80 up there, but I was glad I did, and look forward to going back sometime. So take a look around for the Conifer Cosmos Hazy IPA. Went back to the IPA roots this week. I felt like I was going a little heavy on the stouts and porters recently on this show. Had to bring it back to the center a little bit. That will do it for this episode of the Way Outta Here podcast. I appreciate you swinging by. If you don't already, please subscribe to me on the social media platform of your choice on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, Way Outta Here Podcast. On Blue Sky, Way Outta Here Pod. On the blog, wayoutofherepodcast.blogspot.com. And if you have any feedback, you can send me an email to wayoutofherepodcast@gmail.com. Available wherever you get your podcasts. On Apple and Spotify, that rating will be great. On Apple, a review would be even greater. Thank you so much again. I appreciate you swinging by, and until next time, be safe in whatever it is that you do.